Night fell over Itsukushima, a sacred island where war was forbidden. Yet 20,000 soldiers lay sleeping there, trapped by their own commander's overconfidence. At dawn, a smaller army would strike from two sides at once. But who lured them onto this island, and why?
On a tiny sacred island, 4,000 men waited in the dark. Across the water, 20,000 enemies were sailing straight into a trap they could not see. Why would anyone choose to fight on ground this small?
In the early 1500s, the Chugoku region of western Japan was a battlefield between giants. To the west, the wealthy Ochi clan controlled trade with Korea and China. To the east, the ambitious Amako clan pushed outward from Izumo Province. Caught between them sat the Mori, a minor samurai family ruling a single small castle, Yoshida Koriyama, with barely enough land to feed its own soldiers. No one expected this family to matter. But its young leader, Mori Motonari, would not survive by matching either rival's strength. He would survive by outthinking them both.
Motonari's path to power began with loss. His mother died when he was young, and his father, the head of the clan, fell into alcoholism and died soon after, leaving the family weak and divided. As a second son, Motonari was never meant to lead. But death visited the Mori clan again and again. His older brother died young, and his infant nephew, the rightful heir, died in childhood. By 1523, at the age of 27, Motonari found himself thrust into leadership of a clan that powerful neighbors already considered finished. Motonari's genius was never on display in grand battles. It showed in marriages, alliances, and quiet betrayals timed to perfection. He balanced loyalty between the Ochi and the Amako, giving neither side a reason to crush him outright. When the Amako finally tested him directly, besieging his castle at Yoshida Koriyama with an army many times larger than his own, Motonari refused to panic. He held the walls through a brutal siege, let the enemy's supply lines collapse, and watched the Amako retreat in failure. His small clan had just defeated one of the region's two great powers. But the other great power was changing too. Uchi Yoshitaka, Motonari's nominal overlord, had grown obsessed with poetry, art, and court culture, and increasingly ignored his army. In 1551, one of his own generals, Su Harukata, ran out of patience. Su surrounded Yoshitaka's residence, forced him into a temple, and made him take his own life. Su then installed a powerless puppet as the new head of the Uchi clan, while keeping all real authority for himself. Overnight, the balance of power that had protected the Mori for 30 years was gone. Su Harukata now commanded the resources of an entire province, tens of thousands of soldiers, fortresses, and a navy. Motonari, technically still his vassal, was expected to fall in line. Submission meant survival, but it also meant serving a man who had murdered his own open rebellion meant facing an army that could outnumber Motonari's forces 5 to 1 or more. Most lords in his position would have chosen to bow. Motonari, instead, began preparing, quietly, patiently, for a war he could not possibly win by strength alone. Motonari's plan centered on a small island called Itsukushima, a place so sacred that by tradition no blood was to be spilled there. On it stood a minor fortress that Motonari ordered built and then deliberately left under-defended. To Harukata, it looked like an irresistible target, a weak outpost on holy ground, easy to capture and perfect for staging a final invasion of Mori territory. What Su could not see was that the island's narrow shoreline and cramped terrain would make it impossible for a large army to maneuver or retreat. In the autumn of 1555, Harukata took the bait. He landed an army estimated between 20 and 30,000 men onto Itsukushima, far more than the island could comfortably hold. Tents and supply lines stretched across the narrow beaches, with steep forested mountains rising behind them. Across the strait, Motonari gathered his own forces, roughly 4,000 to 5,000 men, a fraction of the enemy's size. To any outside observer, it looked like the Mori clan was about to be erased from history.
On the night of the attack, a violent storm rolled in across the inland sea. Rain lashed the water, and waves grew dangerous enough that Su's lookouts assumed no army would dare cross. Motonari's own commanders begged him to wait. He refused. Loading his men into small boats, he used the storm itself as cover, slipping across the strait in near total darkness. By the time the rain cleared before dawn, Mori soldiers were already standing on Itsukushima's shore, directly behind the sleeping enemy camp. At first light, Motonari's forces struck from 2 directions at once, one group hitting the camp from behind, another blocking the only escape route along the shore. Trapped between mountains and sea, with no room to form proper ranks, Sue's massive army collapsed into chaos within hours. Soldiers who had outnumbered the Mori 6 to 1 were now crushed against the coastline, unable to retreat, unable to regroup. What should have been an overwhelming victory for Sue Harukata had become a slaughter on ground his own army had chosen.
Harukata fled toward the island's shrine, but there was nowhere left to go. Realizing the battle and his cause were finished, he took his own life rather than face capture. His once massive army, the dominant force in Western Japan only days earlier, had been destroyed almost entirely. With a force a fraction of the size of his enemies, and a plan built entirely on patience and deception, Mori Motonari had just won one of the most lopsided victories in samurai history. The victory at Itsukushima shattered Harukata's power overnight, and the Ochi clan he had controlled was now leaderless and defenseless. Motonari moved quickly. Within 2 years, by 1557, Mori forces had absorbed nearly all of the former Ochi domains, territory the family had needed generations to build.
A clan that had once struggled to defend a single castle now controlled some of the richest provinces in Western Japan. And Motonari was just getting started. To the east, his old enemy, the Amako clan, still held one of the strongest fortresses in Japan.
To the east lay Izumo Province, home of the Amako clan, and their stronghold, Gasan Toda Castle, a mountain fortress considered nearly impregnable. The Amako had once nearly destroyed the Mori clan during the siege of Yoshida Koriyama decades earlier. Now Motonari intended to finish what that siege had started, in reverse. The campaign against Gasan Toda would not be quick. It would stretch on for years, grinding through smaller Amako strongholds one by one, cutting supply lines, and slowly isolating the castle from any hope of relief. In 1566, after years of siege, Gasan Toda Castle finally fell. The Amako clan, once one of the two dominant powers of the Chugoku region, ceased to exist as an independent force. Mori Motonari, the leader of a single small castle just over 40 years earlier, now controlled roughly 10 provinces across Western Japan, one of the largest territories held by any single clan in the country. Yet for all his power, Motonari never forgot how easily it could all unravel. By the late 1560s, Motonari was approaching 70, old for a Sengoku-era warlord. He had outlived nearly every rival who had once dismissed him, not through reckless bravery, but through patience, intelligence gathering, and a willingness to wait years for the right moment to strike. He was famously cautious about overreach, reportedly turning down opportunities to march on the capital and seize national power, judging the risk too great for the reward. His empire was vast, but Motonari understood that an empire built by one man's mind could collapse the moment that mind was gone. Motonari had 3 sons, and instead of dividing his territory and risking them turning on each other, he built something unusual. Each son led a different branch of the family. His eldest, Takamoto, would inherit the main Mori line. His second son, Motoharu, was adopted into the Kikawa family. His third son, Takakage, took over the Kobayakawa family. Together, the 3 branches became known as the Mori Ryokawa, the Mori and its 2 supporting rivers, bound by blood, but each strong enough to stand on its own. According to a famous story passed down for generations, Motonari once called his 3 sons together and handed each of them a single arrow. One by one, they snapped the arrows easily. Then, he handed them a bundle of 3 arrows tied together and challenged them to break it. None of them could. The lesson, he told them, was simple. Alone, even the strongest of them could be broken. Together, the 3 branches of the Mori family would be unbreakable. Whether or not the moment happened exactly this way, the message shaped the clan for generations. Mori Motonari died in 1571 at the age of 74, having transformed a single small castle into the dominant power of Western Japan. His descendants ruled the Choshu domain for over 2.5 centuries,
And nearly 300 years later, it was Choshu samurai who helped lead the movement that overthrew the shogunate itself and restored the emperor. A man once written off as too weak to matter had built a legacy that would help end the entire samurai era.
Not every great samurai story ends in victory. In our next episode, we travel back 2 centuries to a warrior who knew, before he ever rode into battle, that he could not win. Kusunoki Masashige faced an army that outnumbered his own many times over, and chose to fight anyway, for a cause he believed mattered more than his own life. Why would Japan's most loyal warrior march willingly towards certain death?
Mori Motonari proved that in the Sengoku era, the sharpest mind could outlast the largest army, turning a single small castle into one of the great power centers of Japan. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more tales of the warlords, strategists, and rebels who shaped Japanese history. New episodes every day. Thank you for watching.